My only goal today is to make your jaw drop from this chess game by Vasyl Ivanchuk, who was an absolute animal in his prime, and I'm here to prove it to you. He played e4, and his opponent was not some chump off the street, which many of my viral videos go from. No, his opponent is world-class Vasyl Ivanchuk, who was a FIDE world champion in 2006, I believe. I'm not sure. Double check me on that. c5 played by Topalov, and this marks the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6, d4. This marks the open Sicilian, takes, and now knight f6. Attacking the pawn, knight c3, defending the pawn, and now a6. The most popular Sicilian defense variation, the Najdorf, played by Black. And here, White has so many options, I could write a book about how many options White has. But here, Ivanchuk plays the calm and quick bishop e2. You see, he wants to keep his bishop flexible on both wings while getting a quick castle short. e6 played by Topalov. This is a very solid choice to just get this control over these center squares from Black. And now castles, bishop e7, Topalov wants to do the same, and now comes the first aggressive move in the game by none other than Ivanchuk. He plays f4. Here we see that White gets a lot of space from this move f4. That's the goal of it, is a space-grabbing move that takes a lot of these squares in the center as well. Quick castles by Topalov, and here comes the first move that I really like from Ivanchuk. He goes with a king h1, sliding his king into the corner to avoid a lot of these dangerous threats along the weakened diagonal and to prepare some nice things later on in this game. So this is called a prophylactic move because he prevents a lot of the threats before they happen. So queen c7, and now here Ivanchuk sees that his opponent is going to develop his bishop on this large diagonal that's going to completely compromise not only the pawn that's weakened on e4, but also his king. And so he gets scared. And he plays a very nice, once again, prophylactic move, a4, not only to prevent this bishop from going here easily, but also to prevent b5, b4, attacking the knight and trying to win this pawn. So he's just preventing a lot of stuff here. And this will make the black pieces lag in development, and we'll see what troubles come from that lag later on in the game. Knight c6, a developing move from Topalov, and now bishop e3, finishing development of the minor pieces. Rook e8 to make some space for the bishop, maybe play some e5 later on in the game, and bishop e3 played by Ivanchuk. He tries to control d5 as much as possible because Black's real only plan here is to play d5 in a lot of these structures, or e5. Try to pierce through this center. Rook b8. Topalov really wants to develop this bishop. It's the last piece to complete development in his position, and it's a very difficult one to place well in the game. It's going to find a lot of troubles throughout this game to develop, and it's going to create a lot of problems for the black pieces throughout. And now Ivanchuk goes for the second aggressive move of this game, which is pawn to g4. And now we know the hidden reason of this king to h1 sliding not only away from the diagonal, but also away from the weakened file that his king would be on g1 from this g4 push. g4 is threatening g5, and this knight would have no move forward, would have to go backwards on d7, so this is a very aggressive yet attacking move. Bishop f8, g5 attacking the knight has to go back, and now we see the gain of space on this king side. This is called same castled kingside attack, because the kings are castled on the same side, but we're attacking still the king. Nothing is stopping us. Bishop g2 is now played by Ivanchuk, a very calm move once again. We've seen this a lot in this game. King h1, a4, bishop g2. This now is to get this queen open up on the king side so that potentially it can just drop into the zone and attack. A very nice move. Knight takes d4. Now you would think that this is kind of a bad move because bishop takes and the bishop is suddenly better, but this actually lets black breathe and play b5 since the knight is no longer on d4 to prevent this move. But Ivanchuk had a knife behind his back, prepared just for this occasion. You see, on b5, now Ivanchuk can open up the a file and play this very nice rook a7, which happened in the game. And Topalov sadly cannot complete his dream and fulfill it with bishop b7, because now this would take off the defense of this rook on b5, and we just take the pawn, easily attack the queen. So he's forced to play a move like queen d8. That is a mistake. And now we have this very aesthetic position in which almost all of Topalov's pieces are stuck on the back rank. Topalov is probably like top 5 in the world at this point. This is a major accomplishment. The knight is the only player in this game. Now, Ivanchuk goes for a little bit too slow of a move. He prevents this b4 push by black by playing b4 himself and also controlling the c5 square from this knight. A bit of a restrictive move, if you will. e5 now is played just based on the fact that Topalov kind of gives up unconsciously. He doesn't have a great move and now pierces in the center with e5, but it's a bad move for a lot of practical reasons. It creates a backwards pawn on d6 that can't advance now, and also the pawn now does not control f5 or d5, and especially d5, because now this knight, for the first time since hopping on c3, can jump forward. And we'll see this knight coming to d5 shortly. And so we don't take to punish this, because this would favor black. We're taking off their weakness on d6. Instead, he plays a very patient move, Ivanchuk. He goes with bishop e3, drawing the bishop back, but opening up the queen on this weakness, and keeping the weakness on the board, the most important. E takes f4, bishop takes e4, and now we're seeing a lot of pressure coming on this d6 pawn that is now an isolated pawn. After this takes, this pawn becomes isolated. And knight e5, particularly to me, highlights for me, all of black's pieces are sat on the bench. And this knight is the only player on the court. It's like you have a racket, but you don't have a player controlling the racket. And meanwhile, I have the racket, I have the ball, I have the world-class player, I'm Carlos Alcaraz, and this knight is me on a tennis court. I'm not bad at tennis, but I'm not Alcaraz. Knight e5. And so now we go into d5, jumping in, taking a lot of these squares, not creating any threats. But the knight here is so vicious because of the control over the space it has. Bishop g4 attacking the queen, but Ivanchuk doesn't fret. He goes queen d2, simple, and now knight c6. And knight c6 attacks this rook and is the entire reason why I was very motivated to create this video for you, because this is how I found out about this game, from this knight c6 move. In fact, I was reading my very small book that I brought to Europe that is about Ivanchuk's games. It's presented in forms of a lot of his problems directly taken from his games. And I brought it to Europe because it's so small, it's fit in my backpack. And on the third game, it was this position with the knight on c6. And it took me a while to find this because it's really not obvious. Obviously, Topalov is a top player, so against rook takes f7, he obviously saw that he can take, and that bishop takes d6, these discovered checks on the king don't work, because the king just goes back and is completely good, and black is up 2 rooks. So he knew this when playing knight c6. So it begs the question, what's the combination here that's so good? And it took me so long to find it, because I was looking at knight c7, I was looking at rook c7, this knight is loose here, I was looking at queen c3, I was looking at e5 even, knight f6, nothing really seems to work. And I finally solved it in the book, right? And I turned the page to see the solution, and then I see that the second problem right after it is also from this game. And I try to solve that one too, and then after turning the page, the third problem as well is also from this game. And I was just like, okay, I have to drop everything, make this piece of content at 1:33 a.m. So the knight is on c6, attacking this rook. And this, if you retain anything from today, this is one of the keys to attacking chess. It's knowing that your opponent is threatening your rook and creating an even stronger threat on the board that will make your opponent ignore this threat, their own threat, and make your piece still as present on the board. I don't know if that made sense. And so here, I finally found it, and I was so surprised when it was like the correct solution because it works in so many ways. He plays G6. The first brilliant move of 2. In my opinion, this game deserves 3 brilliant moves, but we'll talk about that later. G6. G6 threatens check on this king and forking, pawn fork by the way, on the king and rook. Okay, but our rook is still like completely hanging. So knight takes happen in the game. Let's see what happens on h takes. What's the idea behind G6? And it's very cute. We have cleared this square on G5. You see, when we took on F7 and this king took, this bishop had no good discovered checks. I mean, wherever it went. But by playing G6, you're clearing this square for the bishop to check and attack a queen. So that after, let's say, knight takes, which happened in the game pawn takes, king takes, we're winning a queen here with a discovered attack. But what if you just take? Well, if you take, now we can take on F7. And when the king takes, we have bishop check from this rook on F1, winning the queen. And so what if the pawn on F takes, right? Because now there's no pawn to take here. Well, here we just use what we have, the G5 square, and attack the queen. Use that to attack the queen. And it's so wild how well this works. Because the rook is retained on the 7th rank, right? Its presence is so nice. When you take off the attack on this rook by playing knight e7, first of all, the knight is super passive in a pin. It's over already, but there's rook takes f8, a brilliant move that just wins. Bishop e7 is a better try because you're keeping pressure on this rook. But now knight takes e7, knight takes, and now queen f4, which I was very surprised to find out from the engine. You're just threatening check. And if you just defend the square, now I go with queen h4 and the knight drops. Why? Because our rook is still there. Like, our rook staying here, the more moves it stays here, the easier it is for white to win. But that's not all. Black doesn't have to block here. That would be kind of a bad choice. I was looking at this, and I was thinking, why doesn't this, like, work for black? But it just doesn't. Rook c7, attacking the queen. You let the rook on the 7th rank one move too long. The queen's attacked, and this is a fork. Queen a6, the queen is lacking squares. And now queen c3, attacking this knight. The knight moves, rook a1, and the queen is trapped. Insanity. But that just didn't happen in the game. Because Topalov might have taken like 30 minutes off his clock, I'm expecting, seeing all these combinations. And he kind of like forces himself to take the rook. It's like eating the asparagus that your parents put on the plate when you're young that you didn't want to eat. Like you were gonna make some points as to why you should not eat that right now. You were kind of pissed off about eating the asparagus on your plate. Knight takes a7. And now white goes for this g takes f7 check. If king takes, we win the queen, as we saw, so the king takes refuge on h8. Now white continues with bishop g5, attacking the queen before taking this rook. And this is very important, because by playing bishop g5, we bring into the game 2 more pieces and the lanes. The lane of the rook opens up, the bishop opens up, and further pressure is just built on these pieces. Queen d7, and here, okay, he goes for a little tease, but he takes and takes a knight. Saying to Topalov, I'm threatening to take your bishop. And if I play a knight here, if I turn it into a bishop, it doesn't matter. I'm threatening this bishop. You have to take the promoted piece. So, okay, rook takes, and now queen f2. He's threatening mate in 2, and this is how you convert a position. Because if we go one move back, let's say, here we're not winning in material. White is down a pawn. We sacrificed the pawn earlier on with g6. So we are solely winning on the lack thereof of the black pieces. This bishop has no mobility. This bishop has no control. It's out of play. This knight is completely offside. This queen is in a defensive position. The rook is blocked on this file. Whereas my knight is centralized, outposted, and has octopus tendencies. My bishop has razoring control around the king. My rook is on an open file directly targeting this king. That's, yeah, very vulnerable. So you have to go with tempo moves, threatening, making small threats, imposing on the black pieces. That's how the pieces will further confuse themselves. And here it's really not obvious, despite kind of a elementary threat, how black defends this. You can't defend with the queen. You can defend this way, but it's looking very murky. Black has to bring the, okay, sort of safe king out from hibernation and back into the game. After a long winter's rest, 5 moves, the king is now not where it wants to be. It's in the midst of this very open diagonal. It's very vulnerable. And now Ivanchuk goes with an absolute masterpiece. You see, we have 2 collaborating pieces, a third and a fourth. This is slightly not enough to win because black has also 4 defending pieces. This knight is out of play, so we would be 1 piece up in general thinking. But our bishop is so compromised that we're actually not a piece up when it comes to the piece's involvement. So Ivanchuk lays out this absolute masterpiece of a move. He plays e5. And once again, it's the same tactic as earlier. He is creating space for his pieces. This is called clearing. I have a video on that. It will be up here if you need to practice this tactic. He clears the space for his bishop so that now he can have 5 pieces dominating over 4 weaklings in this position. Topalov doesn't take the pawn. And I'll tell you why he doesn't take the pawn. It loses both ways. If the rook takes, it's checkmate in 1 move. This is fairly obvious for a 2750. But if the pawn takes, there is a particularly beautiful move that I want to highlight. Ivanchuk has this mind-blowing knight c7. Once again, clearing the square for this bishop. He clears 2 squares in 2 moves. With 2 sacrifices, he's sacrificing the knight. The knight is attacking the rook. The knight is also defending the square upon which the bishop would land on so that we would checkmate by sacrificing a queen and taking with the rook. So you're really puzzled as black, and this would just probably force an immediate resignation. If queen takes, just for illustration purposes, we have checkmate here in a few moves. So this would be over. So now Topalov really has to do something convincing, because e5 and the threat of knight c7, threat of knight b6 comes into play. So he goes with h6 attacking our bishop, countering, some counterplay, right? But now it's too little too late. The bishop is attacked, but once again, what's the second thing we've learned from this game? Clearing spaces for our pieces, but also when a piece is attacked of ours and we're in full attack mode, it's good to ignore that threat, like that knight on c6 that was attacking our poor rook. We ignore the threat and we attack a greater value piece. And that's what he does, knight b6. Attacking the queen and also clearing, this is very instructive by the way, I didn't realize how instructive this game is. Clearing the square for this bishop once again. It's all about clearing. Because this bishop involved in the game just means that these squares can be punished. Because black, what happened to the light squares? They're so weak. The knight attacks the queen. The queen moves to c7. And now bishop d5 check is a beautiful pattern. And Topalov must have seen this during the game because he really precisely plays king h7. And let me just show you what happens on king h8. Because it's infuriating how this wasn't the actual game. It would have been so pretty. Queen takes f8 check. Rook takes, and then rook takes. So we sacked our queen outright. King goes to h7. And now bishop e4 check. Laying down the bishop to create this g6 move, forced. And now bishop f6. And you can't really stop checkmate without giving your queen outright on g7. This is outrageous chess. Outrageous. So king h7 is played and now we can't take with check. The combination doesn't work anymore, but still. Bishop e4 check. Why are we just like tic-tac-toeing our bishop? We're clearing the square for our knight. Because our knight is kind of out of play now. So when the king moves back, knight d5 And now all of our pieces are in the game. And once that's done, Ivanchuk leans back in his chair and the work is done for him. After queen d7, he now plays a move that forces resignation. And this move is so pretty, and is also a brilliant move, and is also such a pretty type of tactic, it is named after a chess player called Novotny, and thus carries his name, the Novotny tactic. White to play and win. If you find it, hats off to you. He played knight e7. And this is called a Novotny. The Novotny in chess is when you intercept a piece off a square, but you sacrifice a piece many ways, and many pieces cannot take that same piece multiplied into the sacrifice. I don't know if it's understandable. I made a video. If you need to practice the Novotny, it will be up here as well. So knight e7, you can't take this knight. He resigned. If rook takes, it's checkmate. If queen takes, the queen is gone. And if bishop takes, queen f7 check, the king has to move to h8, and now queen g6. And once again, we said it before, the light squares are being punished, and you can't stop queen h7 checkmate. This knight e7 outlines a perfect last 15 moves of this game. I hope you enjoyed it. Vasyl Ivanchuk was an absolute monster, and I hope your jaw dropped at least once during this game. Thank you so much for watching, and have a brilliant day.